Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Sports Exchange. My name is Scott Morgan, off the Motor City Mad Mouth, and we are welcomed by South Florida contributor Jason Prock. And Jason, thanks for being on the program.
Hey, thank you, Scott and Candy. I always appreciate you having me on.
You're welcome. All right, well, let's talk about some Detroit Lions football. It looks like there's a quarterback conversation going on with the third pick, even though there really shouldn't be one. We're talking about Tua Tagovailoa along with Matt Stafford. What's your take on that?
You know, interesting take, Scott and Candy. One of our local stations, Local 4, had reported that Matt Stafford was going to be traded out over the last couple of weeks, that he had been on the trade block. And so what Local 4 did was they went and doubled down, and they reported it and said, hey, they're going to be, they're looking to trade this guy. But here's an interesting concept, Scott and Candy. The Lions would be cost almost $24.8 million for Stafford to play elsewhere in 2020. So I'm not really sure where that's coming from. Kelly Stafford on her Instagram had made a point and just made a comment that, hey, the Los Angeles Chargers were an excellent destination for him, and it could be for him, and they have a good offense, with Austin Eckler, running back, and some other pieces there, but I just don't see the Lions doing that. Now, as far as Tua, the Lions could draft Tua, but there's a lot of teams. Look at Miami. They got 3 number 1 picks coming up. They could be in play. Now, if you look at Carolina, you look at the Los Angeles Chargers, Jacksonville, those teams could possibly sneak up there and make the Lions an offer. So as far as Tua, I think that for me, I'm not going to trade Matt Stafford. I can't trade Matt Stafford because you didn't win any games with him as starting quarterback without him. So at 3-12-1, they went down when he went down with his injury at 3-4-1. It just doesn't make sense, you guys. And even if you went ahead and you said, "Hey, let's get Tua. His hip injury is great. He's looking forward to the scouting combine next week." I love this guy. I love it. I love him too. I want to see him as a Lion myself. It would give some hope. But Stafford is still a good quarterback. He still has weapons around him that can help him succeed. You have Galladay, Marvin Jones. We don't know if he's going to show back up. But there's an interesting scenario, Scott, because you have a lot of needs otherwise on this team besides quarterback.
Jason, I would interject that Stafford doesn't have the weapons he needs to have in order to be successful, so wouldn't really matter who they had out there as quarterback. If you don't have a line that protects your quarterback and you don't have receivers to throw to, it doesn't matter who you are. Brady didn't win all of his games, and he's supposed to be the GOAT in the NFL.
No, I agree with that. There's, I guess what you're saying, Tom Brady. There's only one Tom Brady's, and he can make your practice squad receivers look into Hall of Famers. but you made a good point, Candy. When you have an offensive line that can protect for you. And as we know, Stafford hasn't always been the best offensive line. So who's to say if Tua comes in there, he's not going to be your savior at quarterback, and he's going to be some great player. I mean, if you look at some of these other teams like Mahomes and whatnot, they had some line in place there. So it's going to be interesting to see kind of where Miami fits into the fold too with these 3 first-rounders. I'm looking forward to it. I really am.
Yeah, I think that I can tell you is the one thing the Lions do lack, and they've lacked a long, long time, is a lack of a running attack. Matthew Stafford is not the problem. I don't care what anybody says. he has the most yardage in Lions history. He's been outside of this unfortunate year where he did happen to get hurt. The reality is, the situation is, the Lions need more defense, and there are a lot of good defensive playmakers at their disposal. Shoot, at number three, there's no reason why they can't get a very good defensive player and impact player. The only thing that bothers me about the Lions, though, is they're talking about letting Darius Slay go, and you can't continue to let good player after good player to go. You just can't do it. And if you do
very true.
do
You
that,
made a great point about that.
well, think about it. Right.
Go ahead.
Yeah, think about it. Kyle Van Noy leaves. By the way, gets a championship ring. Cliff Averill, how did that work out? Definitely not sleepless in Seattle. Okay, he was sleeping well in Seattle with another piece of jewelry. Okay, and the beat goes on. So, wide receivers are they've done well there. They can't continue to get the running back situation. Can't say it's all their fault. Javid Best came out of there, and many people thought that he would be the answer. Then we had Amir Abdullah, and then Kerryon Johnson can't stay healthy. So the running game has been a thorn in their side, and they have some quality receivers. Calvin Johnson left because of the culture, for crying out loud. And you had another fine receiver. You let Golden Tate go. There was no reason to make that move. And, we don't have enough time on the planet to talk about all their problems, because I'll turn 58 before we go ahead and figure it out. It's been the last time they won a championship was on my birthday in 1957, 5 years before I was born. So to make a long story short, okay, Matthew Stafford is fine by me. They don't need Tua. They really don't. The guy is damaged goods. That's all there is to it. And you know what? Miami's even having reservations about him too. Not that there wasn't any hostility when Nick Saban left here to go over to Alabama. Nick Saban, the last thing people in South Florida want to hear about is Nick Saban giving them a recommendation. I still think there's a bad taste in their mouth based on how things played out. So.
There's been a lot of heat going on there with Nick and Alabama right now with his involvement a little bit in Tua's draft status.
Yeah, well, again, there will be. I can't imagine Tua's going to go out there and work out and throw passes at the combine, which I heard probably won't happen. And, the last thing you're going to do for the top 10 pick, let alone a top 5, is you don't want to take a gamble on a guy that may or may not see the field for a while. You're not paying him X amount of dollars. I don't care if the rookie wage scale is in place. You still don't want to invest millions of dollars for a guy that has not been able to stay healthy for the longest period of time. I don't see it. I really don't.
I wanted to bring up a couple things to you really quickly. Miami's got the 3 picks. If the Lions, they could, if they sit there and Miami says, hey, we want to give you 3 first-round picks. There's Derek Brown from Auburn. He's a nice defensive tackle. The Lions need help there in other regards, in other positions. Jeff Okudah, he's projected to go from Ohio State. But, they don't have a pass rusher, somebody that can block, somebody who can really get in there like an Isaiah Simmons of Clemson. Those type of guys, they desperately need a pass rush that can get in there and get to the quarterback. And, and it'll help the offense get in short fields. You force a turnover inside someone's 20-yard line, it certainly helps the offense. So again, the Lions really just have not had enough playmakers, and that's why they're able to be run on so easily, Scott.
Well, I'll end it on this note. When Ndamukong Suh left, they lost their defensive identity. Albeit Sue wanted to go to Miami, was sold a bill of goods by the Dolphins, decided to take Stephen Ross's money. And how did that work out? He was out of a job in Miami in 2 or 3 years. Anyways,
he demanded double teams.
Well, he did. Yeah, right. He was Mr. Nasty. And as a result, but he didn't last very long in Miami, although the only thing he got out of it was the fact there was no state income tax and Stephen Ross's money. But that'll be for another day. So I guess the moral of the story is, from my standpoint, and again, this is your moment or two, Matt Stafford, to me, should be their quarterback for as long as they can keep him. If Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia know what's good for them. This is a year where their jobs are on the line. You don't need to replace the quarterback. You need to pile up wins. They need to get to 8 to 10 wins for those two guys to remain employed by the Lions. So meanwhile, but you got 30 seconds to go. Anything else you want to add to it, Jason?
Yeah, you know what? I was just going to say, I appreciate you having me on. Bob Quinn has already came out and said absolutely no trade talk between Matt Stafford. So he's already shot it down. And, like I said, if you go 3, if you go 2, there's just too many needs there on defense and the offensive line too. Like Candy brought up a good point. So there's not enough help on that team for you to just say, hey, we're going to trade Matthew Stafford when you would you're tapped $24.8 million. That's important to know for people to understand as this team moves forward in this draft status.
All right, well, Jason, job well done, and we appreciate the report back in Detroit. It'll be interesting to see how this whole situation plays out on draft night. I hope that we're all right that Matthew Stafford's a quarterback, and if the Lions go out there and going to invest any money at that position, they might as well invest a little bit of coin there to find a good, strong veteran backup to replace Matthew Stafford, because up until this year, they had a lot of good backups, but they never needed them. So one can only hope that remains the case. So, all right, Jason, thank you very much for being on the Sports Exchange. We appreciate your time. Thank you, Jason.
Scott and Candy, I always appreciate having you on. I look forward to it again.
You bet. Thank you very much.
Yep.
So what are your thoughts, Candy, about what Jason had to say?
I mean, I agree. I think Detroit needs other positions. Stafford's I know in your eyes he's a really good quarterback. He is a really good quarterback. Is he the elite of the elite? I think that it's hard to judge him as that until you surround him with other players to help him get there. You need to have a running game so that people aren't saying, oh, you know what? Matthew Stafford's going to pass because that's all they can do, so let's defend against the pass. They've become too one-dimensional, and because of that, it's hard for him to really shine. He's a good quarterback, so I think he could do a lot better.
All right, with that said, we welcome our next guest, David Levin, who represents multiple platforms. And we're going to go from up I-75 to Detroit, up to I-95 out in Jacksonville. David, thank you for being on the Sports Exchange. Glad to have you on.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on. How you doing?
You're welcome. So anyways, let's talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars. What do you have for me up in northern Florida?
Another hot day. Another discussion about Unique Ngakwe. There's consensus that the Jaguars could go either way with this. They could either franchise tag him and give him the salary commensurate of the top pass rushers in the NFL. But they could use that to work out a long-term deal with him, which would carry over probably into the beginning of the season. Or they could franchise him with the idea of possibly trading him. There are a good amount of layers into the onion you got to peel back with this one. I don't think there's any doubt that the team wants to work out some sort of negotiation with him and keep him. But I get the sense that based on what happened with Tom Coughlin at the beginning of training camp last year, there's still some issues with goodwill. Tom Coughlin and Ngakwe's camp began to negotiate right before the start of training camp, if you remember. I believe it was a short-term deal, and I had to ask what a short-term deal was. Basically, that's first, not 5, where they offered him money somewhere in the neighborhood of $76 million, where about 50 of it was guaranteed up front, and he balked at it, and then Coughlin cut the negotiation off immediately, said, okay, that's it, and that's the last time they talked. I don't know how this one plays out, Scott, only because he's a good pass rusher. He's a liability against the run. But Josh Allen got 10.5 sacks and he fit right into that scheme and play, at a high level. And that's basically the same position that Ngakwe plays.
Well, I guess you presented some interesting points, David. Number one, Tom Coughlin is out of the picture. so he took a hard line on everything. Number two, Trent Baalke is in their front office. So I kind of wonder where the mix is. And number three, the Jaguars developed a reputation by the Players Association that nobody should go there as a free agent. So I think a lot of us are probably stuck between a rock and a hard plate about what really happens during the off season. And does Shad Khan have more say in all of this as to about who really should go ahead and get more say in the whole thing to begin with?
I agree with you. I know that a couple weeks ago, Shad was interviewed right after he announced that they were going to London, and various topics were brought up about free agency and the draft, and the fact that David Caldwell would assume more of a role with the. That was right before they had hired Bobby, by the way, as the director of player personnel. That there would be more emphasis on what Caldwell does, and there would be input from Marone, and this was a different type of feel to it. And then he said, as he was asked by one of the members of Jaguars.com, what is your take on Calais Campbell and Ethan Gakwe? And he said, well, we want both of them back. And that's the right thing to say, but in reality, that may not happen. Just from a monetary standpoint, what kind of cap hell they're in right now. Various sites you look at, they're right at about, borderline where they've come out even. There is one where I read where they have $1.7 million they can spend right now, and then there's one where they're basically $3 million over the cap. So from what you're looking at, basically they're still in hell, and they got to find a way out of it.
So their way out of it, is it trading Foles?
Hi, Candy. How you doing?
Good. How are you, David?
Okay, throw me a curveball.
Well, you're a baseball guy. Why wouldn't you?
I used to play softball. Hey.
I was waiting for something. Here's what I think happens, and it's a possibility now because it's been brought up a couple of times today. It's on local talk radio. They have to find a trade partner that's going to take at least half that salary, and I know that the Cleveland Browns back in 2017 traded Brock Osweiler basically in a draft pick so that they could take his, I think it was $17 million off the books. So they traded him to Houston, where he floundered and eventually retired. It goes down as one of the oddest careers where he basically held a clipboard, played a few seasons, and banked a ton of money. There have been teams that have been bantered about that could possibly jump into this. I know the Chicago Bears have been talked about even before the season was over. We had talked about that one day, Scott, where we said, would they trade him? And then the Chicago Bears, for some reason, were a team that were interested in him. I know that Matt Nagy has a relationship with him from Kansas City.
Right.
DeFilippo is now the quarterback coach there. I would put them there as the front runner, but I have other teams in my head that I think work out just as well if it were to be done. For some reason, I know this sounds really crazy, and I take away all the crap you heard about Brady and the Raiders. I could see him going out west. I could see him playing for the Chargers. I could see him playing for the Raiders because John Gruden loves quarterbacks. And it would be nice if Jay just kind of, gift wrapped that for his brother. It's funny, but it's true.
I know.
Yeah.
No disputing it.
And then what kind of compensation do you get? If the Jaguars package Foles and let's say a third round pick to the Raiders, Chicago, I think you got to put Philadelphia. We talked about this too. The Eagles back in this mix, and they accept. Then they take, and I think it's $22.5 million toward the cap this year. That is his base salary. I know there's some signing bonus money in there and whatnot. But you package all that together, and you have money coming off the books, which then you can keep Calais. And by the way, Calais is still the property of the Jaguars no matter what. They would have to release him. And Ngakwe is not. So you're creating cap space so you can keep Ngakwe, and you hope to you pray to the NFL gods that Campbell either is going to renegotiate his contract or they're going to restructure it so that maybe he gets another year, and instead of it being like a lot of salary, it becomes a signing bonus, which doesn't count as much towards the cap. And and I'm going based on what I've been learning the past few days. I'm not a capologist.
Right.
I write for a living. I do this. I don't know math that well. So.
Where's my father-in-law when we need him? He's a math teacher. I don't know if I would have ever made it through my father-in-law's class, but I guess I'll never know. I don't have to get scrutinized by my father-in-law what I do know about math, but all I do know about logic is you're making a lot of sense with it, because let's not kid ourselves. Jay Gruden is the offensive coordinator, and yes, John Gruden does like quarterbacks. And Nick Foles has a Super Bowl ring, and the Raiders have moved into a new area called Las Vegas. So if I wanted to be a gambling man, regardless of what casino, for some reason or other, partner, you do make a bit of sense when it comes to that one. The Chargers, I don't know about that one, but the Raiders, maybe I'll go there with you.
Let me throw this out there real quick.
Sure.
A team that would want to trade for Foles is in a similar situation like the Jaguars were last offseason. They're in a win-now mode. Jacksonville thought that if they got Foles, remember, they outbid themselves, which was the dumbest thing. They probably could have had him at $15 or $16 million. But they outbid themselves. And they thought that if they had the quarterback, the defense was coming back, and we know what happened on the defense. They had rising stars. They thought Fournette would play, and they didn't expect him to play as well as he did. They thought they'd be okay. And then the bottom dropped out, and we all know what happened with that. So it becomes a fiasco, and it becomes a cluster, and it becomes all of these things that they prayed that wouldn't happen, did happen. So any team that takes Foles, because remember, he's going to be 31.
Right.
He has broken his clavicle twice, which that's a red flag to me no matter what.
Right.
He's an accurate passer, but we saw he has lead feet. It has to be a team with a good offensive line. It has to be a team that can win now, because his window is 2-3 years. I mean, is that what I'm looking at?
Okay. So then my question to you is, if you feel that way, do the Jacksonville Jaguars draft another quarterback with Gardner Minshew as your starter?
I really don't like you right now. No, seriously.
Sometimes I don't like me either, but unfortunately, because I go ahead and ask you a very tough question, you're being challenged.
How about this? This is what I do think. I do believe that somewhere in the back of the draft, they draft a quarterback no matter what. However,
Well, they did last year.
Okay, well, but see, the theory is that you draft a quarterback each year, hoping you hit. The Jaguars drafted a quarterback last year, and they hit. Had Gardner been 6'5" and 225 and had a stronger arm, he would have been a second-round pick. I don't know if he'd be a first-round pick,
Right.
but he'd be a first-round pick. They lucked into him. But I think that if they were to trade Foles, prior to the draft, which I'm assuming that's when they would have to do it, then, actually they have to do it before free agency, because you have to clear the cap space. Then it becomes a little different. Let's say, for the sake of argument, they're at 9, and Derek Brown, who's defensive tackle, is there, and Tua is there.
Right.
Who do you take, Scott?
No. Well, I remember when I was studying for the 215 license for the health insurance test, I used to like none of the above, and that was usually probably good, which is why I passed on the first try with a 70%. If I say none of the above,
Okay, I got you.
if I say none of the above, I'll tell you why I give you that answer, though, David and Candy.
Please do.
What about the XFL? Did anybody dawn on you that maybe if Cardale Jones has a fine year, that maybe there's a quarterback or two that might get the old Rodney Dangerfield, and he will get respect, unlike what Rodney didn't get? And maybe there's a quarterback in the XFL that could elevate himself to the NFL on I-95, 30 minutes away from one of my favorite places, and that's St. Augustine, okay, toward Jacksonville.
I'll give you another one. Even better than that.
Okay.
There's going to be a handful of quarterbacks who are all going to. There's a carousel that they're playing this year. This free agent period is going to be the wildest thing we have seen. It will straighten Candy's hair. That's how serious I am about it. I believe that there's going to be a quarterback there if the Jaguars trade Foles that will be out there who maybe they look at and say he's less expensive. If Gardner has a rookie, second-year slump, then we have somebody who is there. I'm going to throw Teddy Bridgewater out there. I'm going to throw somebody like that who is mobile, has a strong arm, is cost-effective where it may cost us $8 or $9 million. Somebody out there as well who we're not thinking of that may just pop up.
I'll give you that. I'll give you Teddy Bridgewater if indeed they decide to replace the quarterback.
I wanted him to go after Bridgewater last off season. That didn't materialize. I wanted him to be the quarterback.
Right, but you know what? I'll give it to you now, and I guess your comments are very timely. That now that Drew Brees has decided to come back for at least another year, Teddy Bridgewater's services will be out there. I don't know whether or not, and we'll get into another time talking about it, what other veteran quarterbacks would be suitable for it. I still think you have to give Foles another shot under the current regime with Jay Gruden and Ben McAdoo before you pull the plug on this experiment. And then give it another year. I really do. I liken this situation to what's happening in Detroit where, Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia are desperate and they got to go with Stafford. I think that there's some parallels to this one for two teams that probably might be playing in London, much to the dismay of yours truly, because it's a whole lot more expensive to go to London to see the Lions than it is locally in the States.
I like the parallel. I tell you what, I've always been a Stafford fan, and I think that there are times when he gets a bad rap.
Yeah, I'd say all the time.
I'd be quite okay with Matt Stafford playing football in Jacksonville. I know that.
So would I, actually, now that I think about it.
I know you would, but
yeah.
I would be very happy with it. It's not going to happen, but I'd like to see it.
I don't know. You never know.
Let me, and I know we're going to wrap this up, but I know we started talking about free agency and we moved on to quarterbacks. I will say this. I like Gardner Minshew. I think that there is a lot to work with there. We also saw the good and we saw the bad. That game in Houston where he just imploded. I'm sorry, in London against Houston, where he imploded, was the downfall of 0-5. If the Jaguars expect him to take the next step, the offensive coordinator, the whole offensive coaching staff has to figure out a way for him to remain baseline and above. There was no baseline and above last year. He was fine under in a system that wasn't geared for him. It was for Nick, and he did pretty well. So now, what does Jay do to implement a short variation of the West Coast offense where we're taking advantage of a mobile quarterback who has to be at his best when he's improvising on the move? Because if he stays in the pocket, he's screwed.
Right. Well, okay, you got some interesting ideas. I'll be curious to see how the whole thing plays out. You really do. I'm glad you bring a fresh perspective to the whole thing. I guess there's so many different dynamics, as they call it, the silly season in the NFL, and I know a lot of these things are going to play out about which guys are going to be let go, and what dead cap hits are going to be out there. There's a lot of different parts. I think the one thing that can't be lost in all of this as we wrap up the segment, though, is that Doug Marrone and David Caldwell are in the same position that Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia. And you better get in the playoffs, and you better win at least 9 or 10 games, or you're going to be on the unemployment line. And you have quarterbacks at crossroads, although I think Stafford's at less of a crossroads than Foles, because Stafford's only put up over 40,000 yards without the benefit of a running attack, without Calvin Johnson's premature retirement, without Golden Tate, who got traded when they shouldn't have traded him, etc. ... Whereas
I agree with you. It's interesting that you brought up that parallel, because I was going to take the Eli Manning approach. That until Eli had the Saquon, that's the same situation with the Giants as it was with the Jaguars, and then Saquon comes around and it's a different dynamic. But you could parallel the two quarterbacks. I'm hoping to the football guys that Minshew has an amazing second year, and he is the second coming of Brunell and better. But something tells me that at some point he's going to hit that wall again. And I don't know whether it's because he's
it's almost like, hey, he's doing everything off the field that's so freaking cool, and then when he comes to camp, what are we going to expect? And maybe I'm expecting the shoe to drop, or what? And that's just me.
All right, well, with that note, David, we'll wrap it up. Thanks for being on this edition of the Sports Exchange. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, well, we want to welcome to the Sports Exchange Wild Bill Winters. So, Bill, glad to have you back.
Nice to be back, Scott.
Anyways, we're going to talk something other than football, and that's called baseball. My goodness, that's a rarity tonight. But although I'll tell you what, the way things are looking with the Houston Astros, you'd probably want to think it is football, wouldn't you? Is there violence in baseball?
No. I come from a game that is, in pro football where you're down the goal line in the red zone, and you're about, and it's 3rd and 5, and you throw a short pass, and it's obvious pass interference, and the ref doesn't call it because they always get little tight dookies down there in the end zone,
right,
and are afraid to call calling. I can't tell you how many games we witnessed that and watched it on film, and it's not called. So I can relate to what the players are doing, but every sport has its, gray areas, we'll call it. Okay?
Good point. Well, the gray area that's facing the Houston Astros is called that retaliation thing. And Rob Manfred is trying to send out a memoir to everybody. Don't throw at these guys. Dusty Baker is very nervous about them throwing at these guys. And I think you have a lot of clubs there that are looking to get a piece of the Astros. And for obvious reasons, this situation has been nothing more than a first-class debacle in every sense dating back. I've never seen a scandal in all my years in baseball that has really rocked a sport like this one to the point where it's us against the world, because that's exactly what we're talking about. We're not talking about us against the World Series, the guys that obviously won it by utilizing technology to the finest in a way which you hope they didn't use technology to the finest.
Well, let me just say it this way, Scott.
Okay.
Baseball, the players are taught at an early age, if you can steal signs, steal them. That's part of the game.
Right.
Okay? Especially when you're on second base and you got to look in at the catcher. Okay? We're in cyberspace with this technology. We've had people losing jobs over saying the wrong words.
Right.
I think it's so far to the left right now that everybody's a racist or everybody's a sexist and all this stuff. And in one big word, it's overblown.
Right.
Okay? It's hyped to the max. And, we always talk about that pendulum. I think the pendulum will swing back to the middle right now, because right now it's redlining to the left. And this is just another indication, okay, of where we're at right now, because, quite frankly, I've listened to all the interviews, and I'm kind of agree with Martinez, the guy that plays for the Red Sox. We need to move on from this. It's a little bit overblown. I know some players who soon the major leagues and all that, because they feel that the sign stealing ruined his career and he never got an opportunity. Nobody knows for sure. They're going on about Altuve with the electronical thing. He came in the locker room this morning and actually took his shirt off and was showing the tattoo that he had on the side of his neck of his daughter. Right. And, that's why they want to take the shirt off. So a lot of people are posturizing and putting all these hypotheses. And you listen to the guys that were directly affected, like Aaron Judge, Cody Bellinger, the Trout got up there. I think that it's when you look at the number of pitches that were thrown, where the garbage can lids were, banged, you're getting down to minute details, and I don't know for sure whether or not it cost Judge the MVP. I don't know whether the Dodgers were robbed of the World Series and everything. That's how those guys think. But I kind of liken it to be an offensive lineman and watching a linebacker hold your receiver, okay, and the ball's being thrown to him and it's not called. You get pissed off because you feel like you were cheated. You feel like the refs didn't do their job.
Right.
Okay, and you're always going to have that gray area. And I think Martinez said it best. I think it's going to take a year for this thing to blow over. I think that the steroid scandal and I think, the Pete Rose thing were more damaging than this sign stealing.
Right.
In the world we live in right now, they're jumping all over this thing, and they're making it, bigger and bigger than it really is. And I think that a lot of that has to do with the technology. I think there's other teams out there doing it too. They just haven't been caught.
Yeah, well, there's no question that sign stealing, Bill, has been a part of the game for a lot of years. I just don't think it's ever been taken to this level where there's been such a reaction. I know that you and I talk about our best friend called social media, where it's become a lot more magnified than it has been in the past. But the allegations here compared to other things, we're still waiting the punishment for the Boston Red Sox, which I think should probably occur at the end of the week. We've already seen some managers lose their job. Naturally, A.J. Hinch has lost his, and, two other managers as well. So the question is that when you go ahead and compare this scandal to other scandals, where do you think this one ranks? I mean, we talk about steroids. There should be a wing for these guys. I mean, we're talking what? Was it Alex Cora that lost his job, and then Beltran? Of course, Beltran goes undefeated because he never won one either. So that gave the Mets an opportunity to rethink their hire and rid themselves of this whole thing. But let's get back to the main focal point of the question, Bill. We talk about different scandals in the past. We talk about steroids. Where do you think that this one here, compared to other ones, ranks?
I would rank it in third place.
Okay, ahead of
steroids, then Pete Rose, and then this one.
Okay, well, that's fair. Okay.
And just because of the number of numbers, the numbers. I mean, when I looked at it, how many baseball games are during a regular season? I think it's 2,430 regular season games.
Right.
Okay, how many times were the garbage kids' lids banged?
Right.
What, about 1,500? Right. They were all done at home. They weren't done on the road. And the reality of it is that, just because a pitcher, a baseball player knows it's coming, doesn't necessarily mean he can hit it.
That's true.
Okay, but, but here's the deal. You never know for sure, so there's another gray area. So the only thing I would say is we need to move on from this. Okay, it's just sort of like, a blown call in a football game, where the Saints were jogged with obvious pass interference that wasn't called, and it was so egregious. Well, this is really egregious, but I will agree with the players that I don't think the punishment was harsh enough. I think the players should have been fined a lot of money for doing it, because that's one thing they understand, and we need to make sure that we clean up the integrity of the game. But we do need to move on from this, and it's going to take a year or two. And the Astros are going to have a tough time this year. They're going to get thrown at. They're going to get booed at. And over the course of, the season, it's going to wear them down. But the reality of it is I think there need to be some more punishment to these players. I don't think they need to be barred from the game. But I think they should have had a really stiff fine for doing that, because that's what those players understand when they get into their pocketbooks. So, in that sense, I think that maybe the penalties weren't stiff enough. But I don't know what you'd expect Manfred to do. I looked at, I tried to put myself in his shoes. I was sitting there, what else are you going to do? Send these guys to jail? You have to look at it. They have no evidence of the electronic devices being used. As the more stories come out, maybe I'll change my position. But right now, I just think it's in third place. And so it being slightly overblown. And, of course, the teams that were in it, the Yankees and the Dodgers, they're pissed off because they think they got gypped. And they have every right to feel that way. But that's part of sports. But I just know that the Astros crossed their line and they can slap back into reality with a really, really stiff fine, and we move on from this.
So let me throw a hypothetical question at you, Bill. The collective bargaining agreement's up in about a year and a half. Do you think that Rob Manfred is very conscious of that and is trying to be guarded about how he goes about player discipline, knowing full well that the Players Association is supposed to stick up for its members anyways? Because when you think about it, they have a responsibility of being part of a union to protect their own, and now he's stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Well, one of the suggestions that's been mentioned is that they put signs up. If you get caught doing this stuff inside the locker room, if you get caught doing this stuff, you're out of the game.
Right.
Just like gambling with Pete Rose. It's just the way it is. Because you got to come down harsh to keep the integrity of the game.
Yeah, well, you really do. I mean, there was no leniency for Pete Rose when Bart Giamatti banned him. Faye Vincent wasn't going to do it. Bud Selig wanted no part of it. Then Rob Manfred wouldn't bring him back because Pete didn't show any remorse. Although in Pete Rose's case, he didn't help his cause any by going to the Hall of Fame, having a book signing, and trying to overshadow the Hall of Fame weekend. So that doesn't really help Pete one bit. It's amazing how you talk about a sport where the all-time hit king and the all-time home run king are most likely not going to get into the Hall of Fame, although it's still to be determined whether Bonds gets in. But, you know, just because you have numbers doesn't mean you're necessarily going to get in there. If the writers have anything to say about it or being on the ban list, there's no way that Pete Rose is going to get in, even posthumously. He just isn't going to get in because he broke so many rules and they were serious about what it is. And yet those occurred after his playing dates, but nobody really particularly cares anyways.
Well, I will say this to you, Scott. You know, we talk about how, you know, the media today and with technology, we seem to be doing softer penalties for things that, you know, 20 or 30 years ago might have gotten somebody kicked out of the game. You know, technology is also, you know, we're dealing with some issues now that, you know, the founders of baseball and guys that played in the 60s and 70s and 80s never even thought about because they, you know, didn't realize that the technology would be this advanced.
Right.
But you know, like for example, I hate to say this, but like the other day in New York, they busted a $7 million drug ring.
Right.
Okay, and the guys were out with no bail. All right, this is the same thing with the Astros doing something really, really egregious.
Right.
It test the integrity of the game. Maybe affected some players' careers, maybe robbed some teams of winning championships. They don't know whether they've been doing it since 2017 or how long they've been doing it. But that's directly results in them not being able to get a handle on the technology. Okay, but at the same time, the penalty wasn't it wasn't that stiff. Okay, and you kind of wonder whether or not we need to get a little tougher. Okay, with some of the things that are going on because of the technology and the new world we live in. I just throw that out there because it just seems to be a thing that's out there right now where we're kind of getting soft on crime, we're getting soft on cheating, and a lot of things. And a lot of this has been brought to bear by social media.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot more people's opinions than 20 or 30 years ago. So, you know, now that we have more media coverage, we have less penalties. Okay, we don't have as much media coverage as social media in the 70s and 80s, and guys getting their heads handed to them.
Oh, yeah.
All right, and, so it's sort of a compromise. I don't think the players were punished hard enough. I think the organization, the people in the front office were, A.J. Hinch, those guys, I think they really took it hard. All right, but the players are part of the game, so the only way you can't kick them out of the game is you should find the heck out of them. All right, to make sure that they understand that we're not going to tolerate this in the future. So the American public, knows what's going on. We've seen this with the Patriots too. I'll just go and say I think the Flint gate was a bunch of nonsense.
Right.
But it was good, great media coverage, a lot of overreaction. Okay, I think Spygate was a little questionable.
Right.
Okay, but they ran with it and all that stuff. So there's in a lot of sports there's the same type of thing.
Right.
And I think it's how people react to it. Okay, but it also has to do, we get a lot more of this today because of the technology.
All right, well, I got one more point that we'll let you promote your YouTube channel, okay, Bill? Since you're talking about the NFL a little bit, let's talk about the New Orleans Saints, how Sean Payton got the hammer dropped on him and set out a year. So we'll stay with the NFL theme. Yeah, you're right, and I don't know how many players had discipline in that situation. I think a lot of the punishments were levied against the front office and the embarrassment to the owner. So I think that there's parallels between what took place with Houston and about to take place with Boston, although you can't say the general manager got fired over this because he was let go by the end of the regular season. But let's take it to the point where we'll take it that step further. And Sean Payton and was it Mickey Loomis that also took the brunt of what took place and the embarrassment that surrounded the New Orleans Saints when they had those issues?
So.
Yeah,
I believe so.
So it looks like
But I'll joke around with this. When I played for the BC Lions,
okay,
we used to hand out a black hat called a mean blankety blank hat.
Okay,
with $500 in it.
Okay.
And that was for the guy who could knock somebody out in a game.
Really?
On a special teams hit. So over time, we've evolved to be more humane. Now we have technology to the point where it's almost ridiculous. I mean, I'm listening to one guy from the Atlanta Braves that all the Astros should be beat up. Okay, I've got, but people are listening to these guys because they're MVPs like Mike Trout. Mike Trout made the joke, says, yeah, I'd love to have a pitch where I know it's coming. But not everybody's Mike Trout. Okay, so you kind of, sit back and go, all right, I understand his point. He's playing the game. And let's try to make him a little bit more happier with the penalties, with the players and stuff like that. Baseball is the most vengeful game there is.
Right.
So you know that these guys are going to get thrown at. They're going to get browbeat by the fans when they go through there. So, this thing will blow over. But, it's being sensationalized. So, when you look at Sean Payton from the Saints, that was just like the first indication that we're kind of changing the way we're directing ourselves towards, cheating or doing things that are maybe upset the integrity of the game. And then you have to look at the individual games. Okay, I mean,
right.
I can remember, the Lakers and the Sacramento Kings watching a game and saying that ref is cheating. Everybody thought I was crazy, and sure enough, 4 or 5 years later, he went to prison because he was betting on the games.
Right.
Okay, so every sport has its faux pas, and you have to take a look at each individual situation. And there's a huge gray area here in Major League Baseball, but they'll overcome it. I just think that maybe they should have fined the players a little bit more. Okay, and the rest of the stuff I'm fine with, and to make sure that the players know that if they do this, they get caught, they're out of the game in the future, and that should really help the integrity of the game moving forward.
All right, I'm only going to add one point to the last 30 seconds, then you go to your YouTube channel and the other ways to promote yourself. First of all, baseball is one of the only sports out there where you have the unwritten rules where you don't go ahead and bunt when there's a no-hitter, to name one. So, or you don't bunt when there's a route going on to try to attempt a no-hitter. And, there are very few sports that have a lot of unwritten rules. So baseball is definitely a different breed of animal anyhow. I just wanted to get that out there.
You don't rub it in. You don't rub it in.
Right. With that said, okay, I'm going to let you go ahead and take over, and you have about a minute or two to promote what Bill Winters is all about. Okay, go ahead, Bill.
All right, well, you can find me on Facebook. Just Google Bill Winters. Look for the circle with a handsome fellow with a headshot in the circle. You go to my YouTube channel. The easiest way to find my YouTube channel is just type in Bill Winters, but put the word football after my name. And it'll come right up with a purple circle, me wearing a Nike hat. Click on it, you're subscribed. I'd love for you to go to my website, billwinters.biz. You can read my book that I wrote. When the USFL, when I retired and the USFL had folded in the largest antitrust case in this nation's history. You'll see a gallery of pictures there, and also you can find me on my Wikipedia page. The easiest way to do that is just type in Bill Winters football, and it'll come right up, and you can see my body of work. And then, of course, you can find our show if you go to Apple or iHeart or Spotify. Type in Motormouth, 2 words, Motormouth, and Wild Bill Winters, and you'll see our episodes on there and our podcasts. And that's it.
Well, Bill, well done tonight. And I'll tell you what, speaking of our program tomorrow, we look forward to doing another edition of our show tomorrow night. So on behalf of Jason Prock at the beginning, David Levin, and Bill Winters, we want to thank you very much for joining the Sports Exchange tonight. And we hope everybody has a wonderful evening. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good job, Bill.